Hello, amateurs. Welcome to episode 99 of the Amateur Rugby Podcast. Here to help soothe your Sunday morning hangover with some wonderful rugby chat about the grassroots of the game. I'm your host, Tim, and I've got another awesome guest for you today. I met so many dynamic people whilst doing the Great Rugger Run last year in Scotland, but this guy is right at the top of that list. He plays fly half for Cumbernauld RFC, and he's here on the pod today. Please welcome Mr. Chris Burns. Chris, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, Tim. Thank you very much for having me on. This is really cool. I'm excited to chat to you.
Good man. It was, like I said, it was a pleasure to meet you last year at Cumbernauld. So I'd love to just kick off with just how's the season going there at Cumbernauld?
It's going great, actually. We're playing in a semi-final this weekend, so we've got a big semi-final in the bowl. We are looking good in the league. I think we're sitting second right now, but I think we've got a game in hand, so we're pushing for the league. It's between us and two other teams. So we're looking at some silverware for the first time in a very long time at Cumbernauld. So the boys are buzzing. There's a really good energy about the club, and we're excited to bring a double home for all the fans that have been with us all season and throughout the hard years when we weren't winning very much at all. So yeah, exciting times.
So are you finding like training numbers are really high at the moment?
Yeah, it's good. There's a bit of niggle in training, you know, like touch is becoming semi-contact, and that's good. We've got an edge to us. A lot of the teams in our league are really physical, and we're not the biggest team. So, in order to front up, it's good to have that little bit of an edge at training, and it's good energy, and it's all good competitive fun. And we've been bringing home the results every Saturday. So yeah, it's clearly working.
Now, you say you aren't the biggest team, and I saw you play. I can vouch for that. You're not, but you are one of the biggest fly halves I've ever seen. Tell me about that. How you feel the number 10 shirt?
Yeah, I was too soft to play in the forwards. That's why. That was probably it. No, I actually started out, as I'm sure most. So I'm 6'3". I've always been tall for my age. So when I started playing when I was like 15, down at Cumbernauld, my dad, who you've met as well, he played second row. I was tall, so you get chucked in at second row, don't you? And then I slowly worked my way back. Within a couple of seasons, I was playing number 8, and then I get moved to 12, and then I moved club. And when I moved club, that's when they moved me to 10. So that was an experience, to say the least. So yeah, and I've just kind of played there ever since. At first I resisted it. I just kept on saying, I don't like this. I'm not very good at it. I've never really been coached how to play it, but that was a wrong attitude from me, and that probably held me back a little bit. But as soon as I started embracing it and enjoying it, actually, I really, really enjoy the position now. But I do get a few funny looks when people see a 10 on my back. They think, what are you doing playing 10? Why is a second row playing 10? So yeah.
So what was it at the new club? What did they say to you? What did they see in you that made them want to play you at 10?
I don't know. I mean, I've always been someone who likes to practice my skills. I think it came from a place of just not wanting to mess up on a Saturday, So I was always but there's only certain skills you can practice on your own, so it's passing and kicking, really, that's it. So I was always practicing those things, and then maybe some of that kind of came through. And I think I've always naturally looked more towards the creative type players. I've always looked up to them more, so I probably, even though I wasn't getting anywhere close to them, try to emulate them a little bit, at training. I was also maybe like a bit more creative, trying stuff. And maybe that was it. Maybe I just showed a natural inclination towards being in that position. And then I get put in there, and then, like I said, didn't really look back once I get slotted in there and started to get comfortable with the position. But I suppose that I played my last season at under 18s at 12, so that gave me a good standing for sliding in just one more into 10, and then that's been me ever since I played senior rugby. I've only ever really played 10. I've been moved around where needs must, but my position's been 10.
Yeah, and so you say you were looking at some other players as inspiration. Were they within the club? Were they your peers, or were you looking at players on the TV as well? And if so, who were your kind of role models?
Right. So when I was, in terms of like the people kind of in the club and like at amateur level, actually looked up to them. I would maybe say just as much, if not more. We've always had quite a good amateur. Used to be an amateur rugby YouTube show up here before it got taken over by Scottish Rugby officially, and they would just put out highlights of the top level amateur games every week. So when I was like 15, 16, just started playing, you'd be watching these guys. It was called Premier One up here. So these are the top level guys, and you can actually go back and watch highlights, and you see guys like Richie Gray, you know, and like Finn Russell and guys like this playing on these highlights, you know, I think watching those amateurs, because you were a little bit closer to them, you know, it didn't seem so far away as like somebody playing the Glasgow Warriors or Scotland. So there was guys that played with top teams. The top teams at the time were teams like Boroughmuir, Glasgow Hawks, Ayr, you know, these guys that were playing at the very top of the amateur game, some on the pathway through to professional rugby. But when I started watching Super Rugby, I think that's when I really started to like guys like I always loved Nick Evans. He was always I think Dan Carter was so polished, you know, and he could just do everything. But there was just something about the way Nick Evans attacked. He wasn't a big guy, and he was just electric, and I just loved watching him play. So I think from memory, he was the first 10 that I really looked up to. And alongside that, I would probably say somebody like Michalak, who divides opinion, which is understandable. But some of the stuff the guy used to do in the park is just, frankly, like just having the stones to actually try some of the stuff that he did on the biggest stage was always impressive. But yeah, I've probably given away my age there, because as you can tell, there's not a lot of Scottish fly halves on that list. I grew up in a pretty rough period for Scottish rugby. It wasn't the most creative. It wasn't like the rugby we're playing now. But yeah, I say that those are the guys I tended to look up to when I was younger.
Yeah, some good names there. But let's talk about Scottish rugby right now, because you know I think the team is really coming together. What's your view on it, and you know what conversations are you having up there in Cumbernauld?
Yeah, everybody's just so I would say, yeah, just generally just excited and almost I don't want to tip over into arrogance here, but I wouldn't say, personally speaking, I don't necessarily expect us to win, and I wasn't expecting us to go to Twickenham and win. I was hoping for it, of course, and I thought we would, but I wasn't getting ahead of ourselves. But what I do expect now is us to play rugby, play exciting attacking rugby, and I can never think of another time in my life where I've said that about Scotland. Like, I was at Murrayfield when we beat England in the Calcutta Cup for the first time. I can't remember how long. I think it was 15-12 or something. With Chris Patterson kicked 5 penalties. And it was like the tackle count was ridiculous, you know. So that's all it was. It was just pure guts and glory, chucking your body in front of these English attackers for 80 minutes. But now, with the people we have in the team, and especially the backline we have, even our forwards, the way the forwards can play. So I think it's just exciting watching us. And wherever we are in the park, you're thinking we can go to the park and score here. You can kick it deep into your 22, and I'm like, this could be on. Finn Russell could catch this ball and just decide, give the ball to Doohan on the wing, and we're 60 metres down the park. So yeah, I just think it's an exciting time to be involved. I think each year we seem to be kind of getting that little bit better. Like for this year, example, first 2 wins in a row, getting over that hump of beating Wales, who have always been our bogey team. For as long as I've watched Scotland, we just never seem to get. Doesn't matter what's going on in Welsh rugby, they always beat us. And this year we managed to get past them. So yeah, it's a really, really exciting time to be a Scottish rugby fan for once.
Yeah, I'm excited for you, to be honest, because it has been like basically all my lifetime. There's been little peaks and things like that, but it's, you know, generally England win, and like it gets a bit boring when that is the case. So I'm excited that, you know, you're getting to a really, really good standard now. It's awesome. Yeah. But let's go back a little bit into your your playing journey, Chris. Tell me, I understand there's a welcome to senior rugby moment that happened. I'd love to hear about that.
So this was so I'd moved club, and this club played a much higher level than Cumbernauld. They played a good few leagues up, and I'd moved up to the seniors. So I was 18, and I was the height I am now and 4 stone lighter. You know, I was a total beanpole, and I like I said, I was playing 10. So you probably remember this. It was the season after they'd brought in the rule, we had to be 5 metres back from the scrum. You couldn't be in the hind foot of the scrum anymore. And we're playing against team Edinburgh Accies, obviously a very famous team, Edinburgh Accies, you know, one of the oldest, Rayburn Place, one of the oldest rugby clubs in the world, I think. And they had a Fijian gentleman at number 8, who I'll never forget for the rest of my life. And it was the start of the game. I kicked off, and I remember it was a great kickoff. I remember just watching the kickoff, thinking that's a bloody great kickoff I've just done there. And then our players have went to contest it. They've knocked the ball on. They've got a scrum. So I'm 5 metres back from this scrum. And this Fijian's reached in with one hand, of course. Why would he need two? He's Fijian. And then he's got all the skill in the world. Reaches in, pulls this ball out with one hand, comes out the scrum. Our wing forward, like our opposite flanker, hasn't even noticed he's gone. So I'm getting no help whatsoever here. And he just ran right down my nostrils, is how I describe it, because that's what it felt like. And I remember just kind of getting dragged by him for a good 10, 15 metres. It was honestly like being in a car crash. I'd never been hit like that before in my life. And then I somehow kind of tumbled underneath him and he tripped up. And I do remember somebody on the touchline saying, "Great hit, Chris." And I remember thinking, nah, that wasn't anything approaching a tackle. Like, he tripped up over my corpse, essentially. And then I had a big bruise up my ribs. He'd burst my ear open. This was one carry. And the rest of that game was just, I just can't even recall the rest of the game because it was so traumatising getting hit by this guy. And I thought, welcome to senior rugby indeed. I'd done a little bit of training with the seniors at Cumbernauld, and I thought, you know, that way when this is no disrespect to Cumbernauld whatsoever, we were a really good team at the time, but when you go up 4 leagues and you try to do the same things that you've done 4 leagues below, that doesn't happen. That space isn't there. Everybody's faster, everybody's stronger. And yeah, I found out the hard way that day, Tim. So yeah, that was my welcome to senior rugby moment.
That's banging. So do you remember like exactly how you tried to tackle him? Did you try to tackle him like standard way, or was it just like a grab, hold on, be alive?
Yeah, I think I was like a rabbit in the headlight. So I was in terrible technique. I was very much upright, and I just thought, I'm just going to try to wrap him up here, you know, try to wrap up a Fijian up with the upper body. I don't know what was going through my head. And then I very quickly just like fell down, but I held on to his shorts. I remember holding on to like the back of his shorts, and again, just getting dragged along. And then like eventually let go, and then his back foot kind of tripped over me, and then he hit the deck, and then our boys piled on him. But yeah, it wasn't a tackle at all. It wasn't a tackle. I mean, I was just generally in the way, and I didn't even slow down when he hit me. That was the thing. It wasn't as if there was any resistance from me. He just literally ran through me like I wasn't there. So yeah, that was a lesson in getting low, just chopping his ankles.
Nice. So how long did you stay playing for that club?
I played for 2 seasons there. And then I had to stop playing. I had a little bit of a heart issue, which went undiagnosed, so I had to get that treated and things, and had to figure out what was going on. It turned out it was totally fine, and I got over it. And then I went back to play with Cumbernauld. Played with them for a few seasons, and then unfortunately just kind of lost interest. You know, it was one of those ones where a coach came, and it was from outside the club, and he just really didn't like me, and he rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way. Sometimes that happens in rugby. Sometimes it's just a personality clash, and I thought, you know what, I'm not interested in this. And then I tried to go back to Cumbernauld about 4 years ago, and I heard they had like 3 people at training, and I was like, I'm not giving up my Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday for that. So I went and played for another club, which is just down the road, a club called Allen Glens. I think they're actually celebrating the 100th anniversary this year. That's another quite a Al Kellock, the Scottish and Glasgow Warriors lot. That's his local club. So I went and played with them for a couple of seasons, and then I heard things were picking up at Cumbernauld, and my dad was coming back to play, so I thought I'll play another season with my old boy. And I went back to Cumbernauld 2 seasons ago now. So yeah, that's been my kind of club journey.
Right, cool. Now, seeing as you mentioned in there, let's have a little chat about your dad. He's a bit of a character, to say the least. What was he like to play with?
Yeah, I mean, my dad is a really good player. Unfortunately, he got quite a bad injury, which altered his game quite a lot when he came back to play. He got a bad back injury, but in terms of like in the line out, in the tight, around the rocks and stuff. You know, he's just got really good experience. He started playing when he was in the army. It was Tim Rodber was his coach, the British and Irish Line, when he was in the army back when he was 18, I think. So that was his introduction to rugby, was being coached by him. So, and he played the club I was at where I got my welcome to senior rugby moment. That was the club he left and joined, and he played with them for a few seasons. So yeah, he is a character, but he was always just like a very experienced, cool head on the park, and I think he's kind of forte was always in the line out. That was somewhere that he could always be relied on for securing our ball and nicking opposition ball. So I played a full season with him, which was really cool. That not a lot of people get to do that, and we had some really good victories in that time. We beat our local rivals, Lenzie, away for the first time in 10, 15 years, and it was me and my dad on the park at the same time for the full game. So I mean, we're very different players. We are very different players, but yeah, it's cool to share those memories with your dad for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool thing. I know my brother has started playing again because he wants to play with his sons as they get to that age. So yeah. I think it's it's a wonderful thing to be able to do. Now, tell me a little bit more about Cumbernauld, the club. Tell me about the nickname and how that's represented around the clubhouse.
So we're called the Badgers. That is our club badge. It's a badger, so we play in black and white, so you can see the connection to the badger. And I only found this out at our 50th anniversary dinner very recently. Apparently, the reason Cumbernauld play in black and white is because when the club was founded back in the 60s, a Kiwi guy turned up to the founding meeting and suggested that we play in black and white. Obviously, being a Kiwi, he wanted us to play in the same colour as the All Blacks, and that man was never seen again. And he's left his mark on Cumbernauld Rugby Club after one meeting where he said, "Why don't we play in black and white?" And everybody went, "Okay." And then he buggered off somewhere. Nobody knows his name. Nobody knows who he is. So yeah, that's a bit of a fun fact about our history. But yeah, we've had so like I say, we've been on the go since the 60s in the same location. I think the highest leagues we ever reached was back in the old amateur days. There were 7 leagues in Scotland, and Cumbernauld were in the 3rd division. This would be going back to like the kind of 80s, 90s. And yeah, the Badgers is something that's probably came through a little more in recent years with a kind of younger generation and stuff. I can't remember ever it being referred to as like the Badgers when I was a water boy for the first 15 for my dad when my dad was playing. But in recent years, it's something that I don't know, everybody's just really taken to, and it's a bit of our identity, a bit of fun, and it certainly became more of a kind of focal point in the club.
Yeah, because I used your changing rooms when I was there, and I spied 2 stuffed badgers.
2 stuffed badgers, yeah, you did. We do 2 stuffed badgers, yeah, and also a badger mural on the wall that was painted by one of our the first 15 winger, Andrew Agiaco. So we go full send on the badger memorabilia now. So you're never far away from a badger when you're down at Cumbernauld Rugby Club, I can tell you.
Have the badgers got names, the stuffed ones?
They actually don't, no. Which is probably something that's probably something we could do. Name the badger, yeah. Although, yeah, if you open up the whole nickname thing down the rugby club, you can imagine that's going to take a left turn pretty quickly. So maybe we'll just leave them nameless.
Yeah, or you just need a Kiwi guy to turn up and tell you what the name's going to be, and then.
Yeah.
So let's move on to something slightly different now. You don't drink any alcohol at all. So I'm just interested in how that works within a rugby club, because obviously a lot of my experience in rugby, drinking's been hand in hand with it. And although times are definitely changing, I'm just interested how that's been for you at Cumbernauld.
Yeah, it's never been an issue for me. I think because I've never drank in my life, that means that I've never really had to use it to either come out my shell, or I've needed to kind of lean on it, to maybe make friends or, indoctrinate myself into a group or anything. So it's never really been much of an issue for me. I think it became more of a thing maybe when I went to other clubs and people didn't know me. I was just like complete new guy, and it was a bit like, oh, that's a bit strange. Why do you not drink? You get a few questions here and there. And, when you go your first away trip on the bus, there's normally a bus virgin and they've got some crazy thing to do. And I would just never do it, obviously. So yeah, I've never really noticed it, but I just think it's because I don't know any different. And because Cumbernauld been my club, that's the first club I played at. It's always been known that I didn't drink, so it's never really been a big deal. I suppose the one thing I would say is when I went to other clubs, and this is maybe just more of my personality type, I was never really one of the boys at any of the other clubs I was at. I was never really in with, and don't get me wrong, I got on with guys, no bother, but like, I suppose that's a mixture of kind of my personality. I wasn't really that, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't really that fussed about that. And rugby has never been my sole social circle. For a lot of guys, rugby clubs, that's them. All their friends are there and that's it. Whereas I've always had friends outside of rugby and friends from other areas of my life. So it's never been my main source of kind of mates or like a social life. So yeah, I think the not drinking thing came pretty easy. I think, see, once you've been on a couple of bus trips, I mean, I've been on like boys' holidays to Malia with my mates, and my mates drink just like anybody else would drink on a boys' holiday when you're 20, and when you can survive those, Malia and Magaluf and Cancun, stone cold sober the whole time, you can survive a bus trip with the rugby boys pretty easily.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. And I think, times are definitely changing along these subjects. And, not drinking is definitely an option at rugby clubs where, I don't know, I think look back to my early days and it probably wasn't really. So yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah. I think, like I said, with in our team, I'm one of the oldest in our team now. And I have definitely noticed a difference in terms of, see, the bus trips we have now. Don't always the long bus trips. We've got long bus trips like 3 hours long. Going up to like Fort William in Scotland and stuff, going miles away. Boys have a drink after it, but I don't think it's to the same extent that it used to be. And there's way more boys who do drink that are just saying, I'm just going to have a couple of beers on the bus on the way down. I'm not going to go full send on it, sort of thing. So yeah, I think definitely the culture's probably changing a little bit there. Probably changing for the better as well, because it's not quite as intimidating for newer guys, that come into the team. We've had a few new boys join the past couple of seasons who have never played rugby before, and that can easily be a little bit off-putting. Don't get me wrong, boys let their hair down, have fun. I'm all for it. I'm not one of these non-drinkers that looks down on people that drink and get drunk and carry on. Absolutely not. But I think it's certainly made for a more welcoming atmosphere for newer lads that are coming down.
Interesting. So talk to me about these newer lads that have never played before. How do you get them involved in the club? Are you basically coaching them from scratch and bringing them up to speed? How is it working?
Yeah, so it's always interesting, isn't it, when somebody picks up a hobby as an adult, like a new sport, and they've not had the same coaching that most of us have had from, like, say, even if you joined in minis, under 16s and stuff. So it's interesting. You've got to kind of check yourself and remember, like, this person doesn't even know you have to pass the ball backwards. This person doesn't know how to land on the floor and present the ball. Like, there's such basic things that you just do automatically as somebody that's played for years that these people don't do. So I think as a club, we've been, certainly the senior squad is a very welcoming bunch. With like I said, a handful of new boys come down who either haven't played in years or haven't played at all. And our coach is part-time, so the coach isn't always there. So it's up to the senior members of the senior squad to take these people under their wing and to, give them the little coaching points and the pointers and you can see a huge development in them. I mean, the difference in them is unbelievable. In Cumbernauld case, the only issue is we haven't quite had the numbers for a second 15 this year. We've had like 1.5 teams, not quite 2. We've managed to get a couple of one-off fixtures, but we've not quite got the numbers yet for a full second 15 playing every week. So unfortunately, these newer lads haven't had the game time that they would normally have got for the second 15. Purely because for some of them it's actually dangerous to put them on the park in a first 15 game. You know, they don't know what they're doing. They've not had a lot of exposure to contact. There's been that little bit of a kind of hurdle to overcome, but we're working towards hopefully next season having more consistent second 15 fixtures for these new guys, and also for the young lads that are coming through from under 18s, because we've got a great crop of under 16s and under 18s that are, you know, looking for game time at senior level. So that's a big aim for the club next year.
Now, when I was up there at the start of the season, there were quite a few games getting cancelled and teams not being able to be fielded for lack of numbers and stuff like that. Has that carried on throughout the season, or has it improved?
No, it's improved drastically. I mean, I think it's just one of those ones where, you know, I think teams had not to speak ill, but I think teams had things on like stag do's and stuff like that, and they were like, we can't really field our strongest team, so we might just rearrange this fixture. Do you know what? Fair enough. Like, Cumbernauld have been in that situation before where they've been really struggling for numbers. You know, we don't want to, let's not throw stones in glass houses. But yeah, it's certainly not been the case ever since you were up, actually. You know, I think that's just that the start of the season is always a hard time for boys because they've still got people going on holiday. There's still things on that August, September time. So, like, if you are somebody who's maybe getting like 17, 18 bodies and that's it, so you've got your first 15 and a couple of subs, maybe if 2 or 3 of them drop out, you've got nobody else to come in. Whereas we can afford to have a handful of players drop out and we'll easily draft other people in. But some clubs aren't in that position, and you've got to appreciate that. And you would, my attitude is, I would always rather play the game than just get the bonus point win for them cancelling. You want to play. Do you know what I mean? What's the point? Like, you want to play the game, don't you? So yeah, that's definitely not been an issue any longer. Even the teams who are like, so our league, we've got teams like I mentioned earlier that are like 3 hours bus journey away, and these kind of more kind of isolated teams, that's you ask a lot of them to travel every other week. Like for us, we've got to do that once, and it's a party, it's a bus trip, it's fun. But for teams like teams like Lochaber and Isle of Mull are getting a ferry and a bus every game. Like that's a big commitment for these guys, and a lot of these people, like a lot of these teams, the players work in farms and stuff. You know, it's hard for them to get that much time away. So yeah, it can be hard for those teams, but we just played Lochaber at home a couple of weeks ago and they came down with their full squad. So yeah, not been an issue for the rest of the season. Hopefully that continues for the final stretch of the season up until April.
That's good to hear, because it was definitely a bit of a worry amongst quite a lot of clubs that I visited when I was there at the start of the season. So that's good. Now, you mentioned your youth section there. How are you bringing those kids through? What kind of work are you doing with schools or things like that, and how's it looking?
Well, our youth is coached by one of the boys that plays with the first 15, Danny, and another guy, Sandy, who's played at the club forever. He's too broke to play now, but he coaches the under 16s, and they have had to do things like they've merged with other under 16 clubs, you know, who maybe to create a joint team. And Cumbernauld, they won the Shield recently, so an under 16 team won a trophy recently, which was incredible to see. And there's some real talented boys coming through. They join in with us at pre-season, and sometimes they'll join in during the season as well. But every pre-season session, Tuesdays and Thursdays, they were doing their own little session for half an hour, 40 minutes, then coming over and joining us. And you know, it was like not full contact, but you know, we were playing conditioned touch games, and we were really pushing the skill set. And these boys kept up, you know, and you could really see there was some real talent there. And there's one boy in particular who's like a grown man, just one of those boys, you know what I mean? Like we were doing some work in tackle shields. He's 14, and he hit me when I was holding a tackle pad, and I thought, you're 14? Jesus, man, they're breeding them differently these days. But no, it's you know, it's just encouraging to see, isn't it, Tim, for like the next generation of the club, to know that there's people there to fill the jersey, and there's a great crop of young boys there, and it's exciting to see where they can go. We're going to get one of the boys is you know, hopefully going to get a run out for the first 15 over the next few weeks, who's just stepped up from the under 16s, under 17s. So yeah, the future's looking good. I think, like you said, like you alluded to, like it's just continuing that conveyor belt of getting boys interested in playing rugby, getting out to schools, which is hard in the west of Scotland, you know, because you don't have a rugby culture here. And a lot of the times in schools, it takes either a development officer, which is obviously a paid role to be in a certain area and going into these schools, or it takes a teacher who is a rugby player in the school to actually, because that's out. Because at my high school, we had a guy who played at a high level in Scotland, and he's now the player coach at DL Rugby Club, Graham Calder, and he's played rugby all his days. So he was he was pushing. He got me to go for like county trials, other boys involved in different rugby clubs. He was a real driving force behind that. But when he left my high school, that all stopped because there's no other teachers interested in rugby. So it can be hard. You can just kind of rely on luck of the draw. I don't really have much experience with that. I don't know what the kind of solutions are. I just know, and especially in the west of Scotland, it's so football dominated, out with a couple of small pockets of like private schools and things like that. Trying to expand the game to a grassroots level is always going to be a challenge in this part of our country. Places like down the borders, as we all know, the famous clubs, the Melroses, like Doddy Weir's club, all of these places, they're going to have hundreds of players every year. But clubs like Cumbernauld and clubs like similar to ours, they're always going to have to go that extra mile to get their youth sections filled. But there's great people coaching in the youth sections, and there's a lot of people giving up their time and effort. So I'm confident that we'll be able to do that for many years to come.
Now, interesting thing that you said there about two teams merging. How does that work? Does it work? Does it work well? Do they then end up going back to their sort of parent clubs when they move on an age group? How does it work?
Yeah, so we've actually done it with Cumbernauld used to have a women's team, so the women's team done it as well. They merged with another women's team to form one team so they could play in the league. Actually, it works really well because I think to go back to the kind of under 16 example, you just want to play, don't you? You just want a game, and so it's just great that the boys they know, because I remember being at under 18s at Cumbernauld, and we really struggled for numbers, and it was always gutting because you really looked forward to a game on a Saturday or a Sunday, and then it called off, and it was like, don't have the numbers. You're just like, you're excited for this all week, and then it gets called off. So I think the boys really enjoy it. They're not too fussed about it being another club or anything like that. There's no like rivalry or anything. Obviously, when they get to an age where they step up, they would just step up within their parent clubs. There's no poaching of players going on or anything like that, as far as I know. And it just makes sure the boys are getting good game time, so that when they do make that step up to seniors, they're in a good position to do so. Because it's like, if you've not played, you can train all you want. If you've not played a game, it's just not the same. It's not the same.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the idea that you've got there with getting those young lads to train with you in the pre-season. That's another fantastic way of sort of making a stepping stone, not just in terms of playing, but in terms of relationships as well between the youngsters and the senior players.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that's something that when I was 15, I started playing when I was like 14, right? So when I was like 15, 16, I did that at Cumbernauld. My dad was in the first 15, and this was back when Cumbernauld had like 50 people at training. It was huge, and like I was, obviously they would. And the thing is, the guys would always be aware of it. They weren't like smashing you to bits or anything like that, But like you were still like getting involved in training drills. You were, jumping in the line out. You're doing scrums. You're doing bits and bobs, and it was great for me. I think it really brought me on as a player. It obviously made me feel connected to the first 15 as well. But I think when you do that, I think there's a certain level of responsibility on first 15 players to make sure that you are making an effort, because you've got to remember these boys are only 15 years old. They're not going to be forthcoming with conversation. They're teenagers at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean? So you've got to be the one that goes over there. Maybe I'm a bit more familiar with this because I've got teenage brothers. Right, I'm a bit older than my siblings, so I've got a brother that's 17, a brother that's 19. So I know what it's like when they're teen and they're just like sulking about. But it's up to you as the senior player to actually make that relationship and try to somehow, if you've got something to offer them in terms of like a tip or, I've noticed you've been doing this, why don't you try that? That's on you as a senior player. And I think our club does a really good job of that. I think boys naturally do that, but I think it's important to remind yourself of that when you're a senior player in a team, that you are responsible for the next generation and making sure you're bringing them through as best you can.
Yeah, you said it happens naturally. Is there any kind of sort of official way of doing that as well? Do you sort of encourage it amongst the senior players? No, it just happens.
No, it just happens. I just think it's one of those things. It's hard to maybe describe, but I think it's just like the culture, within the club. I just think, it's just a great unit. There's no cliques in our first 15. There's nobody that's like, okay, that's that group over there and that group over there. It is. I know it sounds cliche, but it is just one big group. So I feel like because of that, it's natural that when a young boy comes to training or whatever, they're just automatically included. And we train alongside each other anyway. We train at the same time. Also helps the fact that the under-16s coach plays for the first 15, so there's that link there. So yeah, it's all. And I think this season, like you mentioned earlier, my dad's the vice president. His friend Brendan, who you've also met, is the president, and the boys are making more of an effort to go and watch the under-16s. So if they're playing at home or away, some of the first 15 will go and try and watch. People from like the board will go and try and watch. People on the committee, sorry, not the board, on the committee will go and try and watch. So I think that brings the club together as well, means that every team's getting supported. And by the same token, you'll see the under-16s down watching the first 15 on a Saturday. So yeah, I think it's just a cultural thing within the club this season.
Sounds really healthy. I've been involved in plenty of clubs where that kind of stuff just doesn't happen, and it feels very separate. And and it feels, it's such a shame, really. But good to hear that you're nailing that at the moment. Anyway, now, Chris, let's move on to a completely different tack. I'd love to hear more about your job that you do. I think it's super interesting, and I think there's potential for crossover there in terms of the modern world and how rugby clubs sort of market themselves. So if you could just tell me a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so I run a marketing agency, and our marketing agency specialises in direct response copywriting. So it's mainly to do with sales and personal branding. So we work with a variety of companies, mainly online based companies, and what you would class as like public figures who have a public facing brand, a personal brand around who they are and what they've done and their achievements and things like that. We also work with kind of large companies who deliver like professional services and consulting services, and it's our job to, like I say, go out and market their services, grow their audience, nurture that relationship with their audience so they're seen as a thought leader and an authority in their space. And yeah, that's the kind of work we do.
Yeah, and I've followed a lot of some of your stuff that you put on social media, and I just love the way it's all very, I don't know how to say, like real language. It's not like stuffy, written by a secretary kind of stuff.
No. Yeah, you're so right. It's because it's conversational. It's as if somebody is like we are talking right now. That's how our marketing sounds, and that's how it really should sound, because nobody wants to read some, like you say, some stuffy corporate, high school English sounding essay. You switch off right away because that's boring. And my number one rule in marketing is you should never be boring, because if you're boring, you don't have attention. If you don't have attention, it doesn't matter what you've got to say, nobody's listening to you. Without attention, nothing else matters. So that's definitely the approach we take, and our clients and their audiences really resonate with it. So yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm sure it's probably a long way down the list of priorities for most rugby clubs, but is there something there that rugby clubs could learn from that?
Yeah, honestly, I really do. Yeah, I think there is, because I think that rugby clubs, or anybody, but rugby clubs, for this conversation, you need to think about like what are you trying to do when you're showing up online. Now, look, I understand, like you said, this might be way down the list of priorities, but if you want to take it a bit more seriously and you're listening to this is what I would advise you do. You think about who is going to be looking at your content, who's going to be reading it, who's going to be engaging with it, and what you want to achieve by putting that out there. Because ultimately, I would argue that most people want, say, more players to come. Let's use that as an example. You want more players to come down. So let's think about what that actually means. That means somebody's got to give up their Tuesday and their Thursday. Maybe they've not played before, or maybe they have played a little bit, but they're not really sure about getting back into it. How can you handle all these objections? How can you handle all these barriers that people are putting up to becoming a member of your rugby club? Well, you make it seem like a fun place to be, make it seem like it's worth your while. You show off the people in your club, because that's ultimately what people are looking for. They're looking for somebody they can connect with. nurture that relationship with straight off the bat. So highlight your players, highlight the people behind the scenes as much as you do the players on the park. You know, who pours the pints behind the bar? Who serves the food after the game? Show off these people and show that you are a community club, you know, and it's somewhere that, because remember, people are thinking like, could I bring my family down here? Can I bring my mate? Can I bring my girlfriend? Can I bring my boyfriend? You know, is this going to be because you have to understand that people have what we spoke about earlier, a lot of preconceived notions about rugby clubs, which we have to be honest about. You know, good old boys, so it's all lads, and they're all doing all sorts of weird stuff, and everybody's running about with no clothes on, and everybody's getting steaming, right? Which I understand, like, if that you can do that stuff in the dirty bar in your rugby club. Every rugby club has one. It's a separate bar for the players, and what goes on in there stays in there, right? I get that. But if you're putting stuff out on social media and or whatever platform you have, and you're trying to attract people, that's what I would do. I would try to make it seem like somewhere where you can feel welcome, where you can feel comfortable, somewhere that's worth spending your time. Because like you say, it's a big commitment for people, and you need to show that commitment's worth it, and you need to overcome those preconceived notions that people have. So I hope that makes sense, but that's how I would approach it.
That makes a lot of sense. There's some fantastic advice in there. That's brilliant. Okay, let's move on to the stash section now, Chris. So what is your favourite bit of stash that you've ever received?
I received when I got picked for my county at under 16s, and my dad's before I went for trials, my dad's mate, Big Mick, said, if you get picked for the county, I'll give you a jersey. And I thought, all right, okay, I don't know what that means. And I got picked, and then next weekend down the rugby club, he walked in, he handed me a Scotland jersey, and I thought, that's really cool. And I thought, that's not like any other Scotland jersey I've ever had. And it was Simon Taylor's playing jersey, it had number 8 on the back, and he'd wore it in a game against, I think it's a game we beat Italy in the Six Nations, probably the only team we beat during that period. So yeah, I think it was Simon Taylor's game worn jersey. So that is that's the best bit of stash I've ever. You can't beat that. You know, can't beat that.
That's a cracking bit of stash, and the story behind it as well is just amazing. Now, what's your favourite kit of all time? So this can be any team from any era.
Like, this was hard because I saw this in email and I was thinking long and hard about it. And I think it's the Stade Francais jersey. I can't remember what season it is, but it's the white with the pink lilies on it. It's all white, pink lilies up the middle here, made by Adidas. And I just think I like it just because of just how outrageous and just how French it is. It's just ridiculous. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, there's more aesthetically pleasing jerseys out there. Like, France have always beautiful jerseys. Like, I think the French and Italian rugby tops have always been like really, really cool. But that Stade Francais top, you've just got to tip your hat to the person that designed that. I mean, that's just outrageous.
That's so funny. That really divides opinion, those Stade Francais jerseys. That's been some people's awful kit choice, which is coming up now. Chris, what is your awful kit? What would you throw in the bin?
Harlequins had this, like, it was like brown away kit. I'm sure it was like a kind of brownie away kit, you know. Oh, horrible. I just don't get brown as a kit colour. It's just think, because, like, you know, Sedbergh, like the private school, they play in brown. And I just think of all the colours, because there's a team up in Scotland, a private school up in Scotland that play in brown as well. And I'm just like, of all the colours to choose, why would you choose brown? It just looks horrendous to me. Like, it really offends my eyes. I'm just like, that's disgusting. Like, no thanks. So yeah, that Harlequins one would be in the bin. But to bring it very briefly closer to home, the Scotland orange and blue jersey from back in the day, you know, that alternative one, my God. We've always had terrible alternative jerseys, always, you know, like we've got a nice blue one, nice white one, and then somebody just goes, like the lilac one just now is also horrible, but I would say it's between the orange and blue Scotland top and the brown Harlequins top. I would set both of them on fire if I had the choice, for sure.
Good choices. Okay, we're going to bring this to an end now, Chris, but before we do, is there anything else you'd like to say, or just any kind of closing thoughts or anything?
Just thanks very much for having me on. I don't know, obviously, who's in your audience and stuff, but it's really cool that you're doing this. I love the concept of the podcast. Rugby's given me a lot over the years. I think it's really, really cool that you're focusing exclusively on the grassroots game. So long may it continue.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks so much for your time. It's been really fun to talk to you. And if people want to get a hold of you, how would they best do that?
So if you just search me on Instagram, it's at Savage Scholar Chris is my handle. You can find me on there. Send me a DM if you want to chat about anything we spoke about here, and the links to sign up to my email list and stuff, they're all in my bio. So that's where you can find me. And the rugby club page is, I think it's at Cumbernauld RFC _RFC. Follow the badgers on there as we go for the double this season. And yeah, that's where you can find us.
Follow the badges. Love it. Absolutely love it. Okay, so everything, people listening at home, everything we've mentioned today will be linked up in the show notes, which you can find in one place, and that's at amateurrugbypodcast.com. It just leaves me to say it once again, Chris, thank you for your time, and thank you for everything you did for me during the great rugby run. You're a superstar there.
No problem.
So I really appreciate it.
No sweat, my man. Thanks very much for having me on. Talk soon.
Okay, there he goes. Thanks so much again to Chris. He really was an incredible help during the great rugby run. He gave me his house for the evening. What a man. I really appreciated that. What a superstar. And some really actionable tips in there for your rugby club if you're thinking about how to market. There's some really great tips in there. So brilliant, Chris. Thank you for that. Now, what did you think of last week's pod with Mr. Keith Wallace, the Vice President of the Scottish Rugby Union? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I laughed all the way through that chat with Keith. He's such a funny guy. So let me know. You can contact me, hello@amateurrugbypodcast.com. And join me again next week when my guest will be Bill Folds from Falkirk RFC. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, you can rate and review on your podcast player, like, share, and retweet. But what I'd really like is if you mention it to someone in person the next time you're down your local rugby club. But until then, get out and play.